Blood money and power usually dictate the marital vows in the Romano syndicate. When Vincent was ordered to wed a runway icon to secure a billion-dollar port deal, everyone expected him to kneel. Instead, under the blinding flash of paparazzi cameras and the furious glare of his ruthless father, he turned his back on perfection. He reached into the shadows, lacing his fingers through those of the one-woman society told him to hide. This is their dangerous story. Manhattan's skyline was a jagged graph of wealth and ambition, and from the penthouse office of Romano Enterprises, Vincent Romano owned it all. Legally, he was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar logistics and shipping empire. Illegally, he was the underboss and heir apparent to the Romano crime family, a syndicate that had controlled the eastern seaboard for 3 generations. At 32, Vincent was a man carved from ice and marble, ruthless, calculating, and entirely devoid of the messy entanglements of human emotion. Sitting across from him, drowning in a beige, tailored suit that she felt emphasized every curve she desperately wanted to hide, was Harper Jenkins. Harper was 26, brilliant and deeply insecure. She was not the sort of woman who graced the covers of magazines, nor was she the type to turn heads when she walked into a high-end restaurant. She was plus-size, soft-featured, and carried the weight of a lifetime of subtle rejections. But in the dangerous, blood-soaked world of the Romanos, Harper possessed something far more valuable than a supermodel's waistline. She had an eidetic memory, an unshakable nerve, and a fierce, blinding loyalty to Vincent. She was his executive assistant, his confidant, and the invisible shield that stood between him and his many enemies. The Brooklyn Navy Yard redevelopment contracts are stalling. Harper said, her voice steady as she handed Vincent a thick, leather-bound dossier. Her fingers brushed his for a fraction of a second. She pulled back quickly, her cheeks flushing. Senator Robert Hayes is playing hardball. He wants a larger cut for his offshore accounts, and he's threatening to hand the docs over to the O'Connor syndicate. Vincent didn't look at the file. His dark, piercing eyes were fixed on her. Declan O'Connor doesn't have the infrastructure to run those docs, Harper. Hayes knows that. What is the senator's real game? Leverage, a booming voice echoed from the heavy mahogany doorway. Salvatore Romano, the don of the family, and Vincent's father strode into the room. Salvatore was a man who commanded absolute terror. He wore a bespoke Italian suit that cost more than Harper's annual salary, and his eyes held the cold deadness of a man who had ordered the execution of his own friends. Beside him was his wife, Beatrice, a woman composed entirely of sharp angles, diamonds, and aristocratic disdain. Harper immediately stood clutching her iPad to her chest like a piece of armor. "Mr. Romano! Mrs. Romano!" Beatrice barely glanced at her, her nose wrinkling slightly, as if the air in the room had suddenly turned stale. "Vincent, why is the help still here? We have family business to discuss." "Harper stays," Vincent said smoothly, leaning back in his leather chair. "She knows more about the Navy Yard deal than anyone in this building." "Speak, Father." Salvatore scowled, but walked toward the massive glass windows looking down at the city. Senator Hayes has presented an alternative solution to his hesitation. He is willing to guarantee us the waterfront complete control of the shipping lanes for the next 50 years. No O'Connors, no federal interference, total monopoly. "And the price?" Vincent asked, his tone flat. "An alliance." Salvatore turned around, a dangerous smile playing on his lips. "He wants you to marry his goddaughter, Natalia Croft." Harper felt the air completely leave her lungs. The iPad in her hands suddenly felt incredibly heavy. Natalia Croft. The world knew that name. She was a 24-year-old British-American supermodel, a staple on the runways of Milan and Paris, the face of half a dozen luxury brands, and a woman widely considered to be one of the most beautiful in the world. She was tall, impossibly thin, and radiated a glamorous perfection that made women like Harper feel like a completely different, inferior species. "A marriage," Vincent repeated, his jaw tightening. "You're selling me for concrete and shipping crates. I am securing the legacy of this family," Salvatore roared, slamming his fist on Vincent's desk. "This isn't a request, Vincent. It's an order from the head of this family. The O'Connors are breathing down our necks. Mayor Kenneth Wright and Governor Philip Dawson are looking for any excuse to raid our warehouses. If we lose the docks, we lose our stronghold. You will marry the Croft girl, you will smile for the cameras, and you will lock down that alliance." Beatrice stepped forward, her voice a sharp, cultured purr. "Natalia is a splendid girl. She understands the demands of our world. She is elegant, refined, and she will give us beautiful heirs. It is time you settled down with a woman of your station." She cast a fleeting, derisive look at Harper. Someone who actually looks the part of a Don's wife. Harper swallowed hard, dropping her gaze to the floor. The barb hit its mark, burying deep into the insecurities she had battled since childhood. She knew her place. She was the chubby, efficient assistant who stayed in the shadows while the beautiful people ruled the world. Vincent's eyes darted to Harper, catching the subtle sag in her shoulders. A muscle in his jaw ticked furiously. "I don't need a wife. I need a strategic buyout. I can handle Hayes without tying myself to a runway mannequin." "It is already done," Salvatore declared with absolute finality. "Tomorrow night is the Diamond Charity Gala at the Plaza Hotel. The senator will be there. Mayor Wright will be there. Natalia will be there. You are going to escort her, and at the end of the night, I will announce the engagement to the press. If you defy me in this, Vincent, I will strip you of your rank. I will give your seat to your cousin Donovan, and I will burn everything you have built." Salvatore turned on his heel and marched out of the office, Beatrice gliding silently behind him. The heavy doors clicked shut, leaving a suffocating silence in their wake. Harper kept her eyes fixed on the plush carpet, fighting the sudden, humiliating sting of tears. She had been secretly in love with Vincent for 3 years. She knew the way he took his coffee. She knew the exact temperature he liked the office, and she knew the heavy, silent burdens he carried as a mob boss, trying to legitimize his empire. She knew his soul, but she also knew she was completely, painfully ordinary. "Harper." Vincent's voice was low, laced with an emotion she couldn't quite identify. I'll start drafting the press release for the engagement, Mr. Romano," she said, her voice shaking slightly, despite her best efforts. "I should contact Cartier to have a selection of rings sent to your penthouse by tomorrow morning. Miss Croft's ring size is publicly listed in a recent Vogue interview. I believe it's a size 4. Stop." Vincent stood up, walking around his desk until he was standing just inches in front of her. The scent of his expensive cologne, sandalwood, and bergamot wrapped around her. He reached out his warm fingers, gently gripping her chin and tilting her head up until she was forced to look into his eyes. They were dark, tempestuous, and completely focused on her. "Do you want me to marry her, Harper?" he asked quietly. Harper's breath hitched. No, her heart screamed. "I want you to look at me the way they want you to look at her." But she was a realist. She was an assistant in a beige suit. He was a Mafia prince. It is the logical move for the company, sir," she whispered, stepping back from his touch because it burned too much. "It secures the docks. It saves the family." Vincent stared at her for a long, agonizing moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he turned away, staring out at the city that suddenly felt like a prison. "Order the rings, Harper. and make sure you are at the gala tomorrow night. I need you there. I'll be in the wings, sir, as always." The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a glittering sea of diamond silk and dangerous men hiding behind polite smiles. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over the elite of New York society. Waiters in white gloves carried trays of vintage champagne, dodging politicians, celebrities, and the most powerful mob bosses on the East Coast. In the center of it all was Natalia Croft. She was a vision in a backless emerald green silk gown that clung to her impossibly slender frame like a second skin. Her blonde hair fell in perfect, effortless waves, and her laughter rang out like a delicate silver bell as she charmed Mayor Kenneth Wright and a circle of adoring socialites. Standing a few feet away, Vincent looked like a king dreading his own coronation. He wore a custom Tom Ford tuxedo, his face an impenetrable mask of stoic perfection. Every time a photographer's flash went off, Natalia would lean into him, draping her perfectly manicured hand over his chest, whispering something vapid into his ear. Hidden in the shadows near the kitchen entrance, standing next to a towering floral arrangement, was Harper. She wore a simple dark navy dress that she had bought off the rack. It was meant to make her blend in, to make her invisible. And it worked. The elite guests walked past her without a second glance. She had a clear earpiece in her right ear, monitoring the security feeds from the men posted around the perimeter. "Target is moving toward the south exit," crackled the voice of Liam, the head of Vincent's security. "Just a drunk hedge fund manager." "All clear," Harper sighed, shifting her weight in her uncomfortable heels. Watching Vincent with Natalia was a slow, exquisite torture. The way the supermodel smiled at him, the way Beatrice Romano paraded them around the room like prize-winning thoroughbreds, it was a brutal reminder of Harper's reality. She was the help. She was the chubby girl who organized the fairy tale, but never got to live it. Suddenly her sharp eyes caught a dissonance in the crowd. Near the VIP tables, a waiter was moving too quickly. He wasn't stopping to offer drinks. His eyes weren't scanning the crowd for empty glasses. They were locked onto Vincent. Harper recognized the man's face from a police dossier she had memorized 3 months ago. It was Mickey the Razor Sullivan, an enforcer for the O'Connor syndicate. Panic seized Harper's chest. The O'Connors knew about the alliance. They were making a move before the engagement could be announced. "Liam," Harper whispered urgently into her lapel mic. "Code red, south quadrant. Waiter with a silver tray moving toward the boss. It's Mickey Sullivan. He's armed." "Copy that." Moving in, Liam's voice barked. But Harper could see Liam's men were blocked by a throng of oblivious politicians. They weren't going to make it in time. Sullivan was only 10 feet away from Vincent. He was reaching beneath the white napkin on his tray. Harper didn't think. She didn't calculate the risk. She threw down her clipboard and sprinted across the polished marble floor. She slammed into Sullivan with the full force of her body, just as he drew a silenced pistol from the tray. The impact sent them both crashing into a tower of champagne glasses. The deafening shatter of crystal shattered the elegant hum of the gala. Women screamed. Men shouted. The gun clattered across the floor. Sullivan roared in anger, violently shoving Harper off him. She hit the marble, hard pain flaring in her shoulder, tearing the fabric of her cheap navy dress. Sullivan lunged for the gun, but before his fingers could graze the metal, a heavy black boot slammed down on his wrist, shattering the bone with a sickening crunch. Vincent stood over the hitman, his face a terrifying portrait of murderous rage. He kicked the gun away and grabbed Sullivan by the collar, hoisting him up, just as Liam and the security team swarmed in, dragging the screaming assassin out through the service doors. The ballroom was in absolute chaos. But Vincent didn't care. He dropped to his knees right in the middle of the shattered glass, surrounded by horrified socialites and politicians, and reached for Harper. "Harper!" Vincent's voice was ragged, stripped of its usual icy control. He pulled her gently by her uninjured arm, helping her sit up. "Are you hurt? Did he touch you?" "I'm fine." Harper gasped, wincing as she looked at a bleeding cut on her arm from the broken glass. "He was O'Connor's man. He was going to shoot you. I know you saved my life." Vincent breathed, pulling a silk handkerchief from his pocket and carefully pressing it against the cut on her arm. He didn't care that he was ruining his suit. He didn't care that the mayor was watching. His dark eyes were filled with a fierce, burning intensity as he looked at her. "Vincent, what on earth is happening?" Natalia Croft shrieked, pushing her way through the security perimeter. She looked down at Harper with a mixture of shock and sheer disgust. "Why are you on the floor with your secretary? Get Up the Press is taking pictures. Get away from me, Natalia." Vincent snarled his voice so dangerously low that the supermodel actually took a step back in fear. Before the situation could escalate further, Salvatore Romano breached the circle, his face purple with rage. "Enough of this spectacle," the Don hissed, grabbing Vincent's shoulder. "The threat is neutralized. Security has it. Stand up, Vincent. Fix your jacket. They are waiting for the announcement. You will do this now to show strength. We do not cower because of Irish rats." Vincent stood slowly pulling Harper up with him. He kept his hand firmly wrapped around her waist, steadying her. Harper tried to pull away, acutely aware of the hundreds of eyes staring at her, judging her torn dress, her messy hair, her plus-size figure next to the immaculate, glaring supermodel. "Sir, I need to get back to the security monitors," Harper whispered, terrified of the Don's wrath. "Please let me go." "You aren't going anywhere," Vincent said quietly, his grip tightening. Salvatore stepped into Vincent's personal space, his voice, dropping to a lethal whisper, meant only for his son. "You are embarrassing this family. Senator Hayes is watching. You have the Cartier ring in your pocket. You will walk up to that microphone, you will call Natalia up, and you will secure the docks. If you do not do this, you are no longer my son. You are dead to this syndicate." The ultimatum hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The entire empire, billions of dollars, and his own life within the Mafia hung in the balance. Vincent looked at his father. Then he looked at Natalia, who was quickly pasting on a photogenic, brave smile for the flashing cameras. Finally, Vincent looked down at Harper. She was shaking, holding her bleeding arm, trying so desperately to shrink into the background. She was the woman who knew all his darkest secrets and never judged him. She was the woman who had just thrown her body in front of a bullet for him, without a second thought. Vincent reached into his tuxedo pocket. His fingers closed around the velvet Cartier box. "You're right, Father," Vincent said loudly, his voice echoing across the sudden tense silence of the ballroom. "It is time to make an announcement. It is time to secure my future." The collective breath of the room seemed to catch as Vincent stepped away from the broken glass, moving toward the center of the ballroom, where a microphone stand had been set up for the evening's speeches. Salvatore allowed a grim, victorious smile to touch his lips. He nodded at Senator Hayes across the room. The politician raised his scotch glass in a silent toast. The deal was done. The Romano family would rule the eastern seaboard unchallenged. Natalia Croft preened. She smoothed down her emerald silk gown, practiced a look of surprise, and took a step forward, ready to be called up to the stage. She was already calculating how many millions this wedding exclusive would sell for in Vanity Fair. Vincent reached the microphone. He stood tall, the ultimate apex predator, in a room full of dangerous men. He looked out over the crowd, his gaze sweeping past the politicians, the mob bosses, and his gloating parents. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vincent's voice rolled through the speakers, deep and commanding. Tonight was supposed to be about a business transaction disguised as a romance. The Romano family and Senator Hayes had an agreement. A marriage in exchange for the Brooklyn Navy Yard. A supermodel for a shipping monopoly. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Senator Hayes dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor. Salvatore's victorious smile vanished, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated horror. You did not speak of the syndicate's business in front of civilians and the press. Vincent! Salvatore roared, taking a threatening step forward. Shut your mouth! Vincent ignored him completely. In my world, we are taught that power is the only currency that matters. We are taught to marry for strategy, to bleed for territory, and to view everyone as a pawn on a chessboard. For 32 years, I played that game perfectly. I was the good soldier, the perfect underboss. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the square velvet Cartier box. The paparazzi cameras went into a frenzy, flashing like strobe lights. Natalia, though confused by the speech, took another eager step forward, extending her left hand. But tonight, Vincent continued, his eyes locking onto a figure standing by the shattered champagne tower. Someone reminded me that a kingdom built on cold transactions isn't worth ruling. A woman who owes me nothing threw herself in front of an assassin's bullet for me. She didn't do it for power. She didn't do it for a headline. She did it out of loyalty. Harper stood frozen. Her heart was hammering against her ribs so violently she thought it might break through her chest. The entire room had turned to look at her. The heavy, judging stares of the elite scoured her messy hair, her torn, cheap dress, her bleeding arm, and her curvy figure. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. Vincent stepped away from the microphone. He didn't walk toward Natalia. He walked straight past the stunned supermodel, leaving her standing in the middle of the floor with her hand awkwardly outstretched. He walked directly to Harper. The silence in the room was absolute, save for the furious clicking of camera shutters. Vincent stopped in front of her. He looked down into her wide, terrified eyes, and for the first time in his life, the icy wall around his heart completely shattered. "Vincent, what are you doing?" Harper whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Your father is going to kill us both." "Let him try," Vincent said, a fierce, reckless smile breaking across his face. Right there in front of the mayor, the governor, the O'Connor spies, and the entirety of the New York elite, Vincent Romano dropped to one knee. A cacophony of gasps and shocked murmurs erupted. Beatrice Romano actually swooned, having to be caught by a bodyguard. Salvatore looked like he was about to draw his weapon and shoot his own son. Vincent flipped open the velvet box, revealing a massive, flawless 10-carat diamond ring. "Harper Jenkins." Vincent said, his voice loud enough for the front row of journalists to catch every word. "You have been my shield, my sanity, and the only real thing in a life built on lies. I don't want a business partner. I don't want a trophy. I want you." Harper covered her mouth with her hands, sobbing openly now. I'm not a mob wife, Vincent. I don't fit in this world. Look at me. I am looking at you," Vincent said fiercely, grabbing her left hand. His thumb brushed over her knuckles. "And I see the only woman fit to stand beside me. You aren't just my assistant, Harper. You are my queen. Marry me." For a moment, the world stopped spinning. The terrified girl inside Harper told her to run, to flee the blinding lights and the deadly wrath of the Romano family. But as she looked into Vincent's eyes, she saw the truth. He wasn't playing a game. He was laying his life, his empire, and his heart at her feet. "Yes," Harper whispered. "Yes, Vincent." Vincent slid the massive diamond onto her finger. It was ironically a size 4 meant for the supermodel. It didn't fit Harper's ring finger, so Vincent smoothly slid it onto her pinky, raising her hand to his lips and pressing a fervent kiss to her skin. He stood up, pulling her flush against his chest, and kissed her fiercely, deeply, right in front of the flashing cameras. "Grab him!" Salvatore screamed, completely losing control. "Liam sees him. He is stripped of his rank. He is a traitor to the family. Liam and the security team, torn between their loyalty to the Don and their loyalty to the underboss, hesitated. That second of hesitation was all Vincent needed. He broke the kiss, grabbed Harper's hand tightly in his own, and pulled a sleek black Sig Sauer pistol from his waistband, pointing it directly at the ceiling. Bang! The gunshot shattered a crystal chandelier. The crowd screamed and dropped to the floor in mass panic. "Anyone who touches her dies!" Vincent roared over the chaos. He didn't look at his father. He looked at Harper, his grip on her hand, iron-clad. "Run, Harper! Now!" Together, the newly stripped Mafia prince and his chubby, bleeding assistant sprinted through the screaming crowd, bursting out the side doors of the Plaza Hotel into the cold, unforgiving New York night. They had no money, no empire, and a hit on their heads from the most powerful crime family in America. But as they ran into the darkness, their fingers still intertwined, Harper looked at the heavy diamond shining on her hand. She wasn't invisible anymore. The war had just begun. Rain lashed against the cracked windshield of the stolen 1998 Ford Taurus as Vincent navigated the slick, deserted streets of Red Hook, Brooklyn. They had ditched the limousine 3 blocks from the Plaza Hotel, hijacking the rusted sedan from a terrified valet. Vincent's bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo was soaked and ruined. Harper's torn navy dress clung to her shivering frame, the cheap fabric stained with her own blood. He drove with one hand on the steering wheel, his right hand tightly clutching hers in the console. "We need a doctor." Vincent muttered, his jaw clenched, as he glanced at the improvised bandage his silk pocket square wrapped around her forearm. Blood was seeping through the white silk, blooming like a dark red rose. "Liam has a guy in Astoria who operates under the table, but I don't know who stayed loyal to my father and who defected to me." "No doctors," Harper said, her voice remarkably steady, despite the violent shivering of her shoulders. "If your father put a bounty on us, the underground clinics will be the first places his soldiers watch. Take a left on Van Brunt Street. We are going to the Erie Basin warehouse." Vincent frowned, taking the sharp left, the tires hydroplaning slightly on the slick asphalt. "The Erie Basin property was seized by the feds in 2019. It's locked down." "Legally, yes," Harper replied, leaning her head back against the ratty headrest, closing her eyes. "But physically, the back loading dock door has a rusted padlock that can be broken with a tire iron. Inside, there is a hidden sub-basement the FBI never found. It was used during Prohibition. It has a generator, a clean water line, and a stash of emergency medical supplies. You told me about it 2 years ago when you were drunk after your brother's funeral." Vincent stared at her, stunned. He had completely forgotten that conversation. It was a throwaway comment made in a haze of grief and scotch. But Harper remembered. She remembered everything. They parked the car in a blind alley and broke into the decaying brick warehouse just as Harper described. Inside the damp, freezing sub-basement, Vincent fired up the diesel generator. A string of bare yellow bulbs flickered to life, illuminating a dusty room containing a cot, a table, and a rusty metal lockbox. Vincent broke the lockbox open. Inside were sterile bandages, iodine antibiotics, and a suture kit. "Sit," he commanded, gently guiding her to the edge of the cot. He knelt before her, carefully unwrapping the blood-soaked silk from her arm. The cut from the shattered champagne tower was deep, jagged, and ugly. Harper hissed in pain as he poured the iodine over the open flesh. "I'm sorry," Vincent whispered, his voice thick with an emotion that bordered on agony. His dark eyes, usually so cold and calculating, were swimming with guilt. "I dragged you into a war zone. My father will not stop, Harper. Salvatore Romano would rather burn New York to the ground than let me humiliate him and cost him the docks. And Natalia Croft, her PR team is probably spinning this to make us look like deranged terrorists by now." "Let them spin," Harper said, wincing as Vincent expertly threaded the curved suture needle. "This hurts more than the bad press." Vincent chuckled a dark, low sound that rumbled in the quiet room. He began to stitch the wound, his hands incredibly steady. "Why did you say yes, Harper? When I asked you to marry me, you knew it was a death sentence. You knew I had nothing left to offer you but a target on your back." Harper looked down at him. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her exhausted, but the massive Cartier diamond, still wedged awkwardly on her pinky finger, caught the dim yellow light. "Because for 3 years I've watched you build a legitimate empire, Vincent," she said softly. "I watched you try to drag your family out of the gutter and into the boardroom. I watched you bleed for a father who only saw you as a chess piece. And because I love you, I always have. Even when I thought I was just the chubby, invisible girl taking your coffee orders." Vincent stopped stitching. He tied off the surgical thread, clipped it, and slowly looked up. He didn't say a word. He just reached up, cupping her soft, full cheek in his large hand. His thumb traced her jawline, brushing away a streak of dirt and dried tears. He leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't the frantic, defiant kiss they had shared under the flashing cameras. It was slow, reverent, and deeply intimate. It was an apology, a promise, and a surrender, all at once. "You were never invisible to me," Vincent murmured against her lips. "I kept you in the shadows because it was the only way to keep you safe from my father. The moment he realized you were my weakness, you would have been dead. Tonight forced my hand." Harper rested her forehead against his, drawing a shaky breath. "Then we have to strike back, before Salvatore cuts a new deal with Senator Hayes." "With what army?" Vincent sighed, leaning back and running a frustrated hand through his damp, dark hair. "I am locked out of the company accounts. My men are scattered. The O'Connors are smelling blood in the water. We have no leverage." "You don't have leverage," Harper corrected him, a sudden sharp clarity returning to her eyes. "But I do." Vincent looked at her confused. "I am an executive assistant." "Vincent," Harper said, sitting up straighter, the pain in her arm forgotten as her brilliant mind kicked into overdrive. "Do you know what that means? It means I am the one who booked Senator Hayes's private flights to Costa Rica. I am the one who drafted the shell company charters for the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And I am the one who managed the encryption keys for your father's private offshore accounts." Vincent's eyes widened in disbelief. "My father changes those encryption keys weekly. Only his private Swiss banker and his consigliere have them." "And the consigliere's secretary," Harper pointed out with a wry, dangerous smile, "who happens to gossip with me every Tuesday over lattes. I have an eidetic memory, Vincent. I didn't just file your father's paperwork. I memorized it. Every routing number, every bribe, every hidden Cayman Islands account belonging to Senator Hayes, Mayor Kenneth Wright, and Declan O'Connor." She tapped her temple. "The entire Romano Syndicate's financial infrastructure isn't in a safe. It's in my head." Vincent stared at the soft, beautiful woman sitting on a dusty cot in a ruined dress. He had thought he was protecting her. He had thought he was the apex predator saving the damsel. He was wrong. Harper Jenkins wasn't a damsel in distress. She was a loaded nuclear weapon. "What do you need?" Vincent asked, a slow, predatory grin spreading across his face. "A secure laptop, 3 burner phones, and a strong cup of coffee," Harper replied. "We aren't going to shoot your father, Vincent. We are going to bankrupt him." By dawn, the underground sub-basement looked like a war room. Vincent had managed to contact Liam, who, as it turned out, was fiercely loyal to the underboss and disgusted by Salvatore's willingness to sell his son to a politician. Liam had arrived at the Erie Basin warehouse an hour before sunrise, bringing a military-grade encrypted laptop, untraceable prepaid phones, and two of Vincent's most trusted hitmen. Harper sat cross-legged on the cot, the glowing screen of the laptop illuminating her face. Her fingers flew across the keyboard with terrifying speed. "Okay, Phase 1 is complete," Harper announced, her voice echoing in the damp room. She didn't look like a terrified civilian anymore. She looked like a general. "I just remotely accessed the Credit Suisse portal using the Conciliere's authentication tokens. I have frozen all 14 of Salvatore's primary operating accounts. The money is locked in a digital escrow." Liam let out a low whistle, leaning against the concrete wall with a shotgun resting on his shoulder. Christ, the Don is going to wake up and realize he can't even buy a cup of coffee, let alone pay off the dock workers. Phase 2. Harper continued, picking up one of the burner phones. "We need to sever the alliance between Salvatore and Senator Hayes. Vincent, dial the senator's private cell. Put it on speaker." Vincent complied, punching in the unlisted number. It rang twice before a frantic, angry voice answered. "Who is this Senator Robert Hayes?" barked. "If this is the press, I have no comment on the debacle at the plaza." "Good morning, Senator," Vincent said smoothly, leaning over Harper's shoulder. "I trust you slept well?" "Vincent, you son of a bitch!" Hayes roared. "You ruined everything your father is scrambling. The mayor is threatening to launch a RICO investigation to distance himself from you. Natalia is sobbing on national television, and the Brooklyn Docks deal is dead in the water. You're a dead man." "The deal is only dead if I say it is, Robert," Vincent replied, his voice laced with pure ice. "Because my father doesn't own those docks. I do." "What are you talking about?" Harper leaned toward the phone. "Senator Hayes, this is Harper Jenkins. 3 minutes ago, I forwarded an encrypted email to your private server. I suggest you open it." There was a tense silence on the line, followed by the faint clicking of a mouse. Then a sharp intake of breath. How did you get this?" Hayes whispered, the blustering anger completely vanishing, replaced by cold terror. "Those are the wire transfer receipts from the Romano family to your offshore accounts in Belize," Harper stated clinically, "totaling $4.2 million over the last 3 years. Alongside it are the flight manifests of your trips to Costa Rica with women who are decidedly not your wife. If I press one button, that dossier goes to the New York Times, the FBI, and the Senate Ethics Committee. You will be in federal prison before the weekend." "What do you want?" Hayes choked out. "You are going to hold a press conference at noon," Harper commanded. "You are going to announce that the Brooklyn Navy Yard contract is being awarded to Chesapeake Holdings, a legitimate logistics firm owned by Vincent Romano. Furthermore, you will publicly sever all ties with Salvatore Romano, citing the recent violent incident at the Plaza Hotel as a breach of public trust. If I cross Salvatore, he will have me killed." Hayes panicked. "If you cross me, I will ruin your legacy, put you behind bars, and let the inmates handle you." Vincent intervened, his tone leaving absolutely no room for negotiation. "You have until noon, Senator. Make the right choice." Vincent ended the call and tossed the burner phone onto the table. He looked at Harper, a mixture of awe and fierce pride radiating from his chest. "You are terrifying, you know that." "I'm an assistant," Harper shrugged modestly, though a small smile played on her lips. "We fix messes. But we have a bigger problem, Vincent. Freezing the accounts and blackmailing the senator only hurts your father. It doesn't stop the O'Connors. Declan O'Connor knows your family is distracted by a civil war. He's going to make a move on the armories in Queens today." "Then we let him," Vincent said, a dark strategy forming in his mind. Liam frowned. "Boss, if the Irish take the Queen's armories, they have enough firepower to wipe out the rest of our loyal guys." "They won't take the armories," Vincent said, pointing at the laptop screen. "Harper, can you access the NYPD encrypted dispatch channels, specifically the Organized Crime Control Bureau?" Of course, Harper said, her fingers already dancing over the keys. I have the precinct captain's login. Why? Because Declan O'Connor operates on old-school mob rules. He thinks he's fighting gangsters with Tommy guns. Vincent smiled a ruthless, chilling expression. We are going to fight him with the police. An hour later, Declan O'Connor and 20 heavily armed men kicked down the doors of the Romano family's primary weapons stash in Queens. They expected a bloodbath. They expected to fight Salvatore's loyalists tooth and nail for the territory. Instead, they found the armory completely abandoned. Not a single Romano soldier was in sight. Before Declan could even celebrate the easy victory, the wail of sirens shattered the morning air. Dozens of NYPD SWAT vans, tipped off by an anonymous, highly detailed encrypted tip containing exact floor plans and names, surrounded the building. Helicopters swarmed overhead. Back in the sub-basement, Harper monitored the police scanners. SWAT has breached the perimeter, she reported, listening to the static-laced radio chatter. Declan O'Connor has been apprehended. 50 federal weapons charges. He's going away for life. The Irish syndicate is decapitated. Vincent leaned back in his chair, exhaling a long breath. In less than 12 hours, a disgraced, exiled heir and his bleeding plus-size assistant had frozen a billion-dollar crime empire, blackmailed a corrupt U.S. senator, and orchestrated the complete annihilation of a rival syndicate without firing a single bullet. So, Liam muttered, staring at Harper with profound, almost religious reverence. When is the wedding? Before Harper could laugh, the second burner phone on the table, the one synced to Vincent's personal number, began to ring. The caller ID flashed on the small screen. Salvatore Romano. The room went dead silent. The Don had realized what was happening. He realized his money was gone, his political protection was vanishing, and his greatest rival had just been neutralized by his own exiled son. Vincent stared at the ringing phone. He reached out and answered it, pressing it to his ear. "Hello, Father. You think you have won, Vincent." Salvatore's voice was a venomous whisper, shaking with uncontrollable rage. "You think freezing my accounts and hiding in the dark makes you a Don? I have 500 men scouring this city for you. When I find you, I am going to make you watch as I carve that fat, treacherous little bitch into pieces." Vincent's blood ran cold, a violent, murderous fury surging through his veins. But before he could speak, Harper reached out. She gently took the phone from Vincent's hand, pressing it to her own ear. "Mr. Romano," Harper said softly. "This is Harper." "You dead little whore! Save the threats!" Harper interrupted her voice, entirely devoid of fear. "Your offshore money is frozen. The O'Connors are in jail. Senator Hayes is awarding the docks to Vincent at noon. You have nothing left." "I have an army," Salvatore screamed. "You have employees," Harper corrected him coldly. "Employees who expect to be paid on Friday. And since I currently control the payroll accounts, they work for me now. If you want to survive the week, you will meet us at the Brooklyn Navy Yard at midnight. Alone. Or I will liquidate your pension funds and donate them to the ASPCA." She hung up the phone. Vincent stared at her, his heart hammering with a mixture of profound love and awe. She was the perfect queen, and tonight they were going to dethrone the king. Fog rolled thick and heavy off the East River, wrapping the rusted steel cranes of the Brooklyn Navy Yard in a suffocating grey shroud. Midnight had arrived. The air smelled of salt motor oil and impending violence. Vincent stood perfectly still at the edge of Pier 41. He had shed his ruined tuxedo jacket and wore only his soaked white button-down, the sleeves rolled up to reveal the dark ink of his syndicate tattoos. Beside him stood Harper. She was shivering, swallowed up by Liam's heavy black tactical jacket, but she refused to wait in the car. The massive Cartier diamond still sparkled defiantly on her pinky finger. Headlights pierced the dense fog. A sleek, bulletproof Lincoln Town car crawled onto the pier, its tires crunching over the cracked concrete. It stopped 30 yards away. The heavy doors opened. Salvatore Romano stepped out into the damp night. He was not alone. Despite Harper's explicit instructions, the Don had brought 4 of his most lethal enforcers' men, who carried custom submachine guns and possessed no moral compass. Salvatore's face was a mask of aristocratic fury. He buttoned his cashmere overcoat, his eyes locking onto his son with absolute venom. He didn't even look at Harper. To him, she was a glitch in the system, a temporary annoyance that was about to be violently erased. "You are a fool, Vincent." Salvatore's voice echoed across the empty docks, harsh and grating. "Did you really think a few frozen accounts and a blackmailed politician would make me surrender? My empire money can be replaced. But respect, fear, that is the true currency of this city. And right now these men are going to teach you what happens when you spit on your own blood." Salvatore raised his hand, a sharp, dismissive gesture meant to signal the execution. "Kill the girl first. Make him watch." Vincent didn't flinch. He didn't reach for the pistol tucked into his waistband. He simply looked at Harper. Harper stepped forward. She didn't cower behind Vincent. She reached into the pocket of the oversized tactical jacket and pulled out her cracked burner phone. The screen cast a pale bluish glow over her face. "I told you to come alone, Salvatore," Harper said, her voice ringing out clear and steady against the crashing of the waves. "I told you that your employees work for me now," Salvatore sneered. "My men are loyal to the oath, not to a glorified secretary." "Let's test that theory," Harper replied. She tapped a single button on her phone screen. Immediately, the pockets of all 4 enforcers began to vibrate and chime. Confused, the men kept their weapons leveled at Vincent, but the lead enforcer, a scarred brute named Wyatt, risked pulling his phone from his tactical vest. He glanced at the illuminated screen. His eyes widened in absolute shock. "What is it, Wyatt?" Salvatore barked. "Put the phone away and shoot them, boss." Wyatt swallowed hard, his grip on his submachine gun loosening. "My Cayman Island account. It just received a wire transfer. $2.5 million. The other 3 men checked their devices, their hardened faces dropping in disbelief. Notifications of staggering, life-changing wealth blinked back at them in the dark. "I didn't just freeze your Credit Suisse accounts." "Salvatore," Harper explained, her tone conversational, as if she were reading a quarterly earnings report. "I bypassed the secondary firewalls and liquidated your personal slush fund at UBS. I took the $90 million you've been hiding from the syndicate, and I redistributed it. Every capo, every lieutenant, and every enforcer in this city just received a retirement-level bonus. Courtesy of Vincent Romano." Salvatore spun around his face, turning an alarming shade of purple. "It's a trick. The money is traced. The feds will seize it. Shoot them." Wyatt slowly lowered his weapon. He looked at Salvatore, then at Vincent, and finally at the brilliant plus-size woman who had just hacked the most secure financial network in the criminal underworld from a damp basement. "Sorry, Don Salvatore," Wyatt muttered. "But Vincent just bought our contracts out. And the girl is terrifying. I'm not crossing her." Wyatt and the 3 enforcers deliberately turned their backs on Salvatore, walking away into the fog, leaving the Don completely, utterly alone. The silence that followed was deafening. Salvatore stood frozen on the pier, the realization of his total defeat crashing down on him like a physical blow. He had been outmaneuvered, outspent, and overthrown not by a rival crime family, but by his son's administrative assistant. Vincent walked slowly toward his father. The pavement separated them, but the chasm of betrayal was infinite. "You built an empire on fear, father," Vincent said quietly. "But fear is brittle. It shatters the moment someone finds a bigger weapon. Harper didn't just find a bigger weapon. She is the weapon. Salvatore's hands shook. His arrogant posture collapsed, aging him 10 years in a matter of seconds. "What are you going to do to me?" "I am going to let you live," Vincent replied, his voice devoid of any familial warmth. "Which is more mercy than you would have shown her. Liam has a private jet waiting at Teterboro Airport. You are getting on it. You are flying to Sicily, and you will never set foot in the United States again. If you try to contact anyone in New York, Harper will release the encrypted ledgers to the FBI, and you will spend the rest of your short life in a federal supermax facility." Vincent reached out and grabbed his father's right hand. With a swift, merciless tug, he pulled the heavy gold signet ring, the symbol of the Romano Don, off Salvatore's finger. "The Romano Syndicate is dead," Vincent declared, slipping the ring into his own pocket. "Chesapeake Holdings controls the board now. Goodbye, Salvatore." Vincent turned his back on his father and walked back to Harper. He wrapped his arm securely around her waist, pulling her close against his side. Together they walked away from the crumbling ruins of the old Mafia, leaving the broken king standing alone in the fog. 6 months later, the New York skyline glittered with the same ruthless ambition, but the players had drastically changed. The top floor of the Freedom Tower now belonged to Chesapeake Holdings. It was no longer a front for racketeering. It was the most powerful legitimate logistics empire on the eastern seaboard. And sitting at the head of the massive obsidian boardroom table was not a hardened mobster, but Harper Jenkins. She was reviewing a contract for the expansion of the Brooklyn Navy Yard. She wore a custom-tailored crimson power suit designed by Christian Siriano that flawlessly hugged her curves, celebrating the body she had spent her entire life trying to hide. Her hair was styled in a sleek, confident blowout, and the massive 10-carat Cartier diamond now sat perfectly resized on her left ring finger. "The zoning permits for the new warehouses are approved," Harper said, sliding a sleek iPad across the table to the company's new head of legal counsel. "We even retained Benjamin Braffman to handle the remaining SEC inquiries regarding my father-in-law's old shell corporations. Braffman assures me we are entirely insulated." Vincent leaned against the floor-to-ceiling glass window, watching her with a cup of black coffee in his hand. He wore a sharp navy suit, looking every bit the legitimate billionaire CEO, but his eyes held the same dangerous, protective intensity they always had. He didn't care about the zoning permits. He cared about the way the morning light caught the gold flecks in Harper's eyes. "Excellent work, everyone. We're done for the morning," Vincent announced, pushing off the glass. The executives nodded respectfully, gathering their files and filing out of the boardroom. They didn't fear Vincent because he was a mobster. They respected him because he was a brilliant strategist. But they revered Harper. In the corporate world of New York, everyone knew the rumor of how the CEO's wife had single-handedly dismantled a crime syndicate in one night. Once the heavy oak doors clicked shut, Vincent walked over to Harper. He spun her leather executive chair around so she was facing him, and rested his hands on the armrests, trapping her in his embrace. "You realize you are scheduled to be on a private jet to the Amalfi Coast in 3 hours, right?" Vincent murmured, leaning down to press a soft kiss to her jawline. "It is generally frowned upon to work on your wedding day, Mrs. Romano." Harper smiled, looping her arms around his neck. "The wedding isn't until sunset, Mr. Romano, and I wanted to make sure Senator Hayes's replacement signed the waterfront legislation before we left. Always protecting my blind spots." Vincent chuckled, his forehead resting against hers. "Always," Harper whispered fiercely. They had chosen to marry in Italy, far away from the flashing cameras and the toxic high society of New York. Natalia Croft was currently dealing with a PR nightmare after her reality television show tanked, but Harper rarely thought of her anymore. The insecurities that had plagued Harper for 26 years had been burned away in the fire of their survival. She knew her worth. She was the queen who had outsmarted the devil and saved her king. "You look beautiful today," Vincent said, his voice dropping to a low, husky register as his eyes traced her features. "You look beautiful every day. But today, you look like you own the world." "I don't need to own the world, Vincent," Harper replied, her heart swelling with an overwhelming, absolute love as she looked up into the eyes of the man who had burned his own legacy to the ground just to hold her hand. She pulled him down for a deep, lingering kiss that tasted of coffee and forever. "I already have everything I want." What an incredible journey. From the shadows of the Mafia underworld to the glittering heights of a legitimate empire, Vincent and Harper proved that true loyalty and intelligence will always outshine superficial perfection. Harper didn't just survive the dangerous game of the Romano family, she rewrote the rules entirely and claimed her crown. If you loved this thrilling story of suspense, romance, and ultimate revenge, please hit that like button. Share this video with your friends who love a fierce, brilliant heroine. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more gripping, dramatic stories every week. Let us know in the comments what you thought of Harper's brilliant checkmate.